Welcome back. This is factoring. So I can factor polynomials by using what I know about polynomial multiplication. So factoring means what multiplies to give that answer. So you're going to undo the distributive property. So let's review some of our factoring rules. So greatest common factor, you're always going to look for that first, no matter what. All right, so let's look at just greatest common factor only. So our GCF for this first one, so 3x and 6 have a number in common, so they have that 3 in common, and then they don't have an x in common because 6 does not have an x. So we factor out the 3. So the GCF is 3, so that means it's 3 times, and that means we're dividing each of these by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, or just the x. And then negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. All right, looking at the next one, our GCF, our greatest common factor, is going to be a 2. And this time, they both have an x in common. So we're going to be dividing each of those by 2x. So that 2x goes out in front of the parentheses. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. X squared divided by x leaves an x left over. And then 2x divided by 2x is a 1 left over. So be careful when you're dividing something by itself. It's not 0. You'll always have that 1 left over. All right, the next one, they have a 2 in common. See how they're each even numbers. So our GCF is going to be 2. And then we look, each of them has an x. So this one is also, they have a 2x in common. So 2x out front. And then 8 divided by 2 is 4. X to the third divided by x is x squared. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then x squared divided by x is a single x. And then negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And then the x's cancel out or divide out to be a 1. So always make sure that that greatest common factor gets put out in front of your parentheses and that you're putting the stuff after the parentheses in standard form. All right, basic trinomials. So we're trying to decide what multiplies to make C and combines to make B. So you'll either see it in the box or in the X or diamond. So whichever one you like, or there's also guess and check where you see what numbers multiply from your chart. So I do a combination of guess and check and the box. So I list my multiples of my numbers. So multiples of 8 that add or subtract to equal 6. So if you're doing these, so this is, oh my gosh, that keeps popping up, equals B. So then this one is C on top, B on the bottom. And then this is P and Q. So P and Q add or subtract to equal B, if you're doing it that way. All right, I'm going to move my box over here. So I know my x squared is going to go here. So always your x squared goes there, and then your C goes in that bottom box. Then we know we have x's and x's here. So this is your P and your Q. So we know that those will add up to be 6. So we have 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. Well, 1 plus 8 does not equal 6, it equals 9. 2 plus 4 though equals 6, so 2 and 4. So they're both positive, so that means that our numbers will also be positive. So x squared and x squared and 4x have an x in common. 2x and 8 have a positive 2 in common. And then x squared and 2x have an x in common. And 4x and 8 have a 4 in common. And then you can check your multiplication. X times x is x squared. 4 times 2 is 8. And then 2x plus 4x equals 6x. So your factors are x plus 2, x plus 4. So if you're doing the diamond, that was 8 and 6, and then 2 and 4. So it's just up to you, whichever way is best for you for factoring, then you can choose that method. All right, go ahead and try the next one and then unpause when you're ready to check your answer. All right, so you should have gotten x minus 2 and x minus 5. Notice that it's a negative 7 and a positive 10. So that means both numbers have to be negative in order to add to make that positive 10. So just be very careful and check your signs when you're looking to factor. All right, go ahead and try the next two and we'll come back and check your answers. All right, for C, you should have gotten W plus 6 and W minus 2. And then for D, you should have gotten X minus 6 and X plus 3. So you should be pretty good on factoring at this point. You should have seen it in Math 2 quite frequently. And then Math 3, you see it. So you should be getting used to this factoring your numbers. All right, factoring by grouping. So that means that we're grouping terms together and then finding a greatest common factor so we can see if there's a pattern for your equation. So it has to have 4 terms for the grouping. So you group the first 2 together and the last 2. So this is your first group and your second group. So we want the GCF for both. So GCF of the first one, notice they don't have any numbers, but they do have that x squared in common. And then the second one, we don't have an x in common, but we do have our numbers in common. So -2. And you will match the sign for these ones. So those come out front, so x squared, and then we'll have a 3x left over and a 1. And then if we divide out a -2 on this one, so, 2. So that leaves us a 3x plus 1. Because a negative divided by negative makes a positive. So notice that now these are the same. So our first factor is our GCFs. So x squared minus 2. And then our second factor is that 3x plus 1. So you always want to make, when you're factoring by grouping, you want to make one of the factors the same. So notice that 3x plus 1, 3x plus 1. So you're trying to find that greatest common factor that will do that. All right, factoring when there is a number in front, you can either turn it into grouping or use the box method. So you'd have to change these and do that grouping. It's easier just to do the factoring at this point. So it's going to be A times C is going to add or subtract to make B. So remember, this is A, B, and C. So A times C is -6, and then B is 1. So remember, if it's by itself, there's always a 1 there. So we have 1 and 6, 2 and 3. So it's a positive negative, so that means our little numbers are negative. 6 minus 1 does not equal 1. 3 minus 2, well, oh, that works. So now when you're putting it in your box, so we have our 2x squared and -3, so that stays the same. So you only use your C value here, not the A times C. So be very careful when you're putting those in your box. So we have 3x, -2x, and then you're just pulling out the ones that are in common. So they have a 2x in common, +3 in common. Here they just have an x, and here is -1 because they don't have any other number in common. So our factors are 2x plus 3 and x minus 1. Now, if you were doing just the guess and check, you would end up with your 2x minus 2 and 2x plus 3, straight from over here. So you'd have to divide out that 2 that's in common. So you get your x minus 1 and your 2x plus 3. So that's how you go from here to there and how you get rid of that extra 2. So either way, you end up with that same answer. All right, go ahead and try the next one. So go ahead and pause and come back and check your answer. So you should have gotten 5v plus 4 and 2v plus 3. So on this one, you had to split up the 10 to be 5 and 2. So be careful with that when you're factoring. If you can't pull out the whole number, see if you can split it up between what they have in common. So 2 times 5, that makes that 10. And then this one was a long one because you had to figure out all of your factors of 120. So always, if you have a big number, just start with 1 and then go down your list to see which numbers will work. All right, let's look at this next one. All right, notice how on this one, they're all even numbers. So we can take out a greatest common factor. So there's a 2 in common for all of those. So 3y squared minus 7y plus 2. Then it makes it a smaller equation, so that way you can do your factoring. So 3 times 2, we get 6. We want it to add or subtract to make -7. So we have 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. So it's a negative positive, so that means both of these will be negatives. And it will be that -1 and -6. So you have 2 in front, so make sure that that gets in front. So make sure you do the second one when you're putting it in your box. So -1y, -6y. So we have a 3y in common here, and then a negative 1, y, and negative 2. So negative 2 times negative 1 makes that positive 2. So 3y minus 1 and y minus 2. So always remember GCF. Always check for that. You can take it out at the end, but it makes things a little tricky. So always take that out at the beginning. All right, next one, same thing, that GCF. Notice how they all have an x in common. So we go with our lowest x, and we take out that x squared from every term. So we'll have 9x squared plus 6x plus, and then remember it's a 1. It just doesn't cancel out and then it's 0. It's that 1 left over. So go ahead and do the do the factoring on that second one and come back and check your answer. Okay, so you should have gotten x squared times 3x plus 1 squared, or that x squared times 3x plus 1 times 3x plus 1. So notice the factors are the same. So when that happens, that's just a squared there for your answer. All right, the next one, go ahead and check. Just remember, check for that greatest common factor first, and then you should be able to factor the rest. All right, you should have gotten 3x to the third, and then x minus 5, x plus 3, because the factors were 3 and negative 5 after taking out that 3x to the third. All right, special patterns. So difference of squares. So that's if you have an x or a squared minus a b squared. So each of your terms are squared. And then you'll end up with a plus and a minus. And how to get a and b. So square root of a squared equals a, and square root of b squared equals b. So that means you're just square rooting these. And you have your plus minus. So square root of x squared is x. Square root of 25 is 5. You can do your factor tree if you want. And then you want it to be 0. So 1 and 25, 5 and 5. And then 1's positive, 1's negative. So that makes that 0. So it's up to you whether you want to do the square roots or your factor tree. It's up to you to decide on those. So go ahead and do those. Remember to check for greatest common factors if you find one, and then come back and check your answers. All right, these are your 3 answers for B, C, and D. Notice for D, it's a plus in the middle, so that same rule kind of applies, but since it's not that negative in the middle, you have to solve it this way, so that x squared plus 9 equals 0. Then you take the square root of both sides after subtracting that 9 to both sides. And then whenever you square root a negative number, remember square root of a negative 1 is I. That's that imaginary number. So you end up with x equals plus or minus 3i. So that's where that x plus 3i and x minus 3i come from. Because when you multiply those together, so you have 3i times negative 3i, you're going to get negative 9i squared. And then I squared equals negative 1. So you'll have negative 9 times -1. So that equals +9. So that's kind of how that works. Stat complex numbers. You shouldn't have any of those ones. If you do, that's how you get that I in the answer. All right, and then factoring is a skill that comes up all the time in math. So you need to be comfortable with factoring. So if you need help, please ask me for any help that you need, or come after school or for tutoring if you're still struggling with the factoring. I'm happy to help, and then our tutors are happy to help as well. So go ahead and work on your assignment and let me know if you have any questions.